I thought the park ranger was just trying to scare me. When I pulled into the empty campground that evening, he leaned into my window and said something that didn't make any sense. "If you hear someone walking around your tent tonight, don't look outside." At the time, I assumed he was joking. Now I wish I had listened. The campground was about an hour outside of town, buried deep in the kind of forest where your phone signal disappears long before the road does. Tall pine trees surrounded the entire area, and the road that led in looked like it hadn't been maintained in years. I only found the place because someone on a hiking forum mentioned it as a quiet spot where you could camp alone without dealing with crowds. That was exactly what I wanted. I had just finished a long week at work and decided to spend a couple nights out there by myself. No city noise. No traffic. Just the woods. When I reached the entrance to the campground, I noticed something strange right away. The place was empty. Not a single car. There were about 10 camping spots scattered around a small clearing, each with a fire pit and wooden picnic table, but every single one of them was vacant. At first I thought maybe the place was closed. But then I saw the ranger truck. It was parked near the entrance, an old green pickup with the park logo faded on the door. The ranger himself stepped out as I pulled in. He looked older, maybe late 50s, with a gray beard and a hat pulled low over his eyes. He walked up to my window slowly and knocked on the glass. I rolled the window down. "Evening," he said. His voice sounded calm, but there was something about the way he looked at me that felt off. "Evening," I replied. "Is the campground still open?" He glanced over my shoulder at the empty road behind me before answering. "Yeah," he said. "Technically." That word stuck with me. Technically. I asked him if I needed to pay somewhere or fill out a form, but he shook his head. "No one's been coming out here lately," he said. I laughed a little. "Well, that's perfect for me." He didn't laugh. Instead he leaned his arm on the door of my car and looked out toward the tree line surrounding the campground. Then he said something strange. "You planning on staying the night?" "Yeah," I said. "Maybe 2 nights." The ranger sighed quietly. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "You can stay if you want, but if you hear something tonight, just ignore it." I frowned. "Hear what?" He paused for a moment like he was deciding whether or not to explain. Then he said, "Footsteps." I waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. Instead he straightened up and stepped away from the truck. "People sometimes hear someone walking around their tents at night," he continued. That made me laugh again. "Probably just animals," I said. The ranger didn't smile. "No," he said. Then he leaned slightly toward the window again. "If you hear footsteps, don't look outside." For a few seconds I honestly thought he was messing with me. Maybe it was some kind of campfire ghost story the rangers liked to tell visitors. But the way he said it didn't feel like a joke. I asked him what he meant by that, but he shook his head again. "Just some advice," he said. Then he started walking back toward his truck. Before getting in, he turned around and added one more thing. "Camp near the middle of the clearing." "Why?" I asked. He pointed toward the trees surrounding the campground. "Just trust me." With that, he climbed into the truck and drove off down the road, leaving me alone in the silent campground. For a few seconds I just sat there in my car watching the dust from his truck settle back onto the road. Part of me wondered if I should just leave. But honestly, the place looked perfect. Quiet. Peaceful. Exactly what I came for. So I picked a campsite near the center of the clearing, just like the ranger suggested. Setting up the tent didn't take long. Within about 20 minutes I had everything ready. My tent faced toward the fire pit, with the forest about 30 yards away on every side. The sun was already dipping behind the trees by the time I finished. The forest grew darker quickly. Out there, once the sun drops, night arrives fast. I built a small fire and cooked some food over it while the sky slowly faded from orange to deep blue. For a while, everything felt normal. Calm. The wind moved softly through the branches above. Somewhere far off in the woods, an owl called out. Eventually the fire burned low, and the cold night air started creeping in. I checked my watch. 11:42 p.m. Time to sleep. I crawled into my tent and zipped it closed, sliding into my sleeping bag. For a while I just lay there listening to the forest. The quiet out there is different from the quiet in the city. It isn't silent. There are always sounds. Leaves moving. Branches shifting. Distant animals calling out. But eventually my eyes started getting heavy. Right as I was about to fall asleep, I heard something. Footsteps. Slow ones. Crunching softly over the gravel outside my tent. At first I assumed it was a deer or maybe a raccoon wandering through the campsite. But then I noticed something strange. The footsteps stopped. Right next to my tent. And whoever it was standing completely still. For a few seconds, nothing happened. No more footsteps. No movement. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I stayed completely still inside my sleeping bag. My eyes were wide open in the darkness of the tent. I told myself it was probably just a deer. Deer wander through campsites all the time. But deer don't stop like that. They keep walking. Whatever was outside my tent wasn't moving at all. It was just standing there. Right beside me. I held my breath and listened. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. And then I heard it again. A single step. Crunch. Slow. Deliberate. The footsteps started moving again. But this time they weren't walking away. They were moving around the tent. Slowly. Crunch. Step. Crunch. Another step. The sound of gravel shifting under weight circled the tent in a slow loop. Like someone walking around it, studying it. My heart started beating harder in my chest. Animals don't circle tents. They sniff around. Then they leave. This was different. This sounded careful. Controlled. Like whoever it was, didn't want to make noise. I could hear the footsteps pause again. This time on the opposite side of the tent. For a moment I thought maybe they were leaving. Then something brushed against the fabric. Very lightly. The tent wall pushed inward just a little. I froze. Completely. My brain screamed at me to look. To unzip the tent and see what was out there. But the ranger's voice suddenly came back into my head. If you hear someone walking around your tent tonight, don't look outside. At the time it sounded ridiculous. Now it didn't. Another slow step moved closer to the tent entrance. The zipper. I could hear breathing now. Soft. Right outside. I stopped breathing entirely. Then I heard it. The faint sound of metal sliding against fabric. The zipper. It moved. Just a little. Not enough to open the tent. Just enough to test it. A slow dragging sound. Like someone gently pulling it down, 1 inch at a time. My chest felt like it was going to explode. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. The zipper stopped. For a few seconds everything was quiet again. Then a shadow appeared on the tent wall. The moonlight outside cast the shape clearly through the fabric. Someone was standing right in front of the entrance. Perfectly still. Watching. I could see the outline of their head. Their shoulders. The shape of their arms slowly lifting toward the zipper again. And that's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. The footsteps I heard earlier had been circling the tent. But now, Whoever was out there was standing exactly where the entrance was. Like they already knew where it was. Like they had done this before. The shadow stayed there. Perfectly still. I could see it clearly through the tent fabric. A head. Shoulders. An arm slowly reaching toward the zipper. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then the zipper started sliding again. Slow. Quiet. Just a few inches. That was enough. Cold air slipped into the tent. My heart was pounding so loud I thought whoever was outside could hear it. The zipper stopped again. Then a hand appeared through the opening. Just the fingers at first. They pushed the flap slightly wider. Moonlight spilled inside the tent. And for a second, I saw the face outside. It was a man. Not a ranger. Not another camper. Just some random guy standing outside my tent in the middle of the forest. He was smiling. I don't know why that made it worse. But it did. I didn't think. I just kicked my way out of the sleeping bag and shoved the tent wall as hard as I could. The poles snapped sideways and the whole tent collapsed toward the man. I scrambled out the other side and ran. Barefoot. Straight toward my car. Behind me I heard movement. Fast movement. The man cursed and stumbled as the tent tangled around him. That bought me maybe 3 seconds. I reached the car, yanked the door open, and jumped inside. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the keys. The engine finally started. I slammed the gas. The headlights lit up the clearing as the car turned. For a split second, I saw him again. Standing in the middle of the campsite. Watching the car leave. He didn't chase me. He just stood there. Completely still. I drove straight out of the campground without stopping. About 20 minutes down the road I finally got cell service again. I called the park office. The same ranger answered. When I told him what happened, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "You saw him too?" I asked what he meant. The ranger sighed. Then he said, "You weren't the first camper to hear footsteps at night." I asked if the police ever caught the guy. There was another pause. Then the ranger said something I wish he hadn't. "No one's ever actually seen him before."